We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 136a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing a case of a shchiv meira, someone on his deathbed who says kisvu utanu mana leploni, write up a document and give a mana to so and so. And the Gemara says that if he dies, that's only going to be effective if it was b'miyape es kocho, if the whole reason for writing up the document was just to enhance what he is giving over. And the Gemara asked on the previous summit, what is considered to be miyape es kocho? And the Gemara now answers, Kedo Amar Rav Chisda, it's like Rav Chisda said, v'konina minei mosef al matan tado. Let's say the person says that it should be a kinyan in addition to this gift. That would be an example of miyape es kocho. We'll see the Rashbam in a moment. Hachanami here also in our case, do Amar af kisov. If he says even, you should even write and sign and give it over to him. So then it's clear that the purpose of the document is in order to enhance what he's doing. He's not saying that the kinyan should only take place with a document. The problem is if he says that the kinyan should only take place with a document and then he dies, we say that it would not be effective because ein shtar la'achar misa, you can't have a document after death. But if the purpose of the document is just to enhance what he is doing, like in this situation where he's saying af kisovu v'chasomo v'havulei, so then it would be effective. And the Gemara continues, Itmar was stated, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel halacha kosvin v'nosnin. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says the halacha is that we do write and we give. V'chein Amar Rava Amar Rav Nachman, and similarly Rava says that Rav Nachman says halacha kosvin v'nosnin, and the halacha is that we do write and we give the money in this situation. And the Rashbam explains, Kedamar Rav Chisda, it's like Rav Chisda says, Lekamon bePerak Mishameis, later on in Perak Mishameis. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, Shchiv meira shekasav kol nechasav afal b'shakanu miyado. Shchiv meira writes over all of his property, even though they made a kinyan, im amad choser, if he gets better, so then he can retract on what he gave. Umashma ha'im emeis mekabel matanakon, and the implication is that if he dies, then the recipient is going to acquire it. V'afal b'shekasav kinyan b'hachman ha-shchiv meira, even though a kinyan was written in this gift of the shchiv meira, lo amrinon shema lo gamar lahaknoso ela b'shtar, we don't say that maybe his intention was only that it should work with a document, ve'ein shtar la'achar misa, and there cannot be a document after death. We don't say that, rather it is effective. Umakshinan mina hasam l'Shmuel, and we ask a question over there according to Shmuel. Diamar mana shchimera shakasav b'kinyan lo yadana my idon ba. He says that if you have a mana shchimera with a kinyan written in, I don't know what the halacha is. The shema lo gamar lahaknosa ela b'shtar, because again maybe the kinyan is only supposed to be made with a shtar. Ushtar shel shchimera eno kona ad la'achar misa, and a document of a shchimera is only effective after death. V'ein shtar la'achar misa, you can't have a document after death. So therefore we ask that as a question over there. Umeshani hasam, and the Gemara over there answers, b'miyapes koch, if the reason for adding the document is just in order, l'miyapes koch, in order to make it stronger, so then we're going to say that it's effective. Meaning, Ahud Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that case of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel is b'miyapes kocho, ve'ein ha-kinyan megareya koach hashtar shel shchimera. In that case, the kinyan does not lessen the strength of the shtar of the shchimera, shelo hikne lo ela liafos es kocho, because the purpose of the kinyan was just in order to enhance it. V'amrinan, and we say over there a similar question to over here, heichi dami miyapes kocho, what would be an example of miyapes kocho? And Amar Rav Chisda answered, v'kanina minei mosef al matan tado. He says the kinyan is in addition to this gift. Kilomar eino ela tosefes bialma liyapes es kocho. Through that, you're indicating that this is just an addition that we are doing in order to strengthen, to enhance this kinyan. And the Rashbam continues, halacha kosvin v'nosnin, the halacha is that we do write and give la'achar misa, meaning after he dies it is effective, and that's specifically b'miyapes kocho, again, if it's phrased in a way that it's miyapes kocho, that it's just seen as an enhancement. Rav Yochanan, this follows Rav Yochanan on the previous Amud, the Amar Tibadik, who says we have to examine it, we have to see if it's written in a situation where we can say it's b'miyapes kocho. V'achim mukminan le behedya lahad Shmuel b'miyapes kocho lekamon b'mishameis. We say this explicitly later on, that we're talking specifically when it's miyapes kocho, that's when we say the kinyan is effective. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hakosev nechasav levanav, if somebody writes over his property to his sons, tzarech sheyichtov mehayom ulachar misa, he needs to write from today after death, divrei Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, and the idea over here is that the person wants to use the produce from the land until he dies, and so he's giving over the guf hakarka, he's giving over the actual land to the sons right now, but the sons are only going to get the produce after he dies, and until that point in time, until he dies, he has the rights to the produce. That's what it means means when he writes Mehayom Ula'achar Misa, and this is talking about a healthy person who's giving this property over to his sons. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Yossi says, Eino tzarech, he doesn't even need to write Mehayom, and it is still effective, and the Gemara will explain that. And the Mishnah continues, Hakosev nechasav livno li'achar mos, so again, the same basic idea. He writes over his property to his son, and it's going to take effect after his death. Again, the idea is that the father is going to use the produce until his death, and then the son will start to use the produce. So the Mishnah says, Ha'av eino yachol limchor, the father is not able to sell, mipnei shein ksuvin leben, because the property is really written over to the son, so the father can't sell the property. V'haben eino yachol limchor, and the son also cannot sell the property, mipnei shein b'rshos, because right now the property is in the possession of the father. And the Mishnah explains, Machar ha'av, now let's say the father does sell, so mechurim ad sheyama, so it's going to be sold until he dies. What that means is that the buyer is going to assume, is going to be like the father, just like the father was able to use the produce until his death. Now the father sold the property. What that really means is that the buyer can use the produce until the father dies. And Machar haben, let's say the son sells the property, and again the son has no real rights to the property till the father dies, so ein lelokech behen klum ad sheyama sa'av, the buyer won't be able to use the property at all until the father dies. And the Gemara says, if he writes that it's going to be from today and after death, what difference does that make? Why should that be effective? Hatnan, didn't we learn in the Mishnah in Meseches Gittin, if a person gives a get, and he says it's from today after death, get ve'eno get. We say it's a get, but it's not a get. It's a suffix whether that's a good get or not, because we don't know if he means that the get should take effect from today, which would be effective, or maybe he means it should take effect after death, and you can't have a get after he dies, and therefore, since it's a suffix, if he dies, she should do chalitza but not yibam, because we're not sure if she's divorced or not. And so why over here does mehayom ulachar misa, why does it work when it comes to git and we say it's a suffix whether it works or not? And the Gemara explains, Hasam over there, misaf kolon, we are in doubt. Itanoa have chazara have. When he says that the get should be mehayom ulachar misa, is it a condition? Meaning after he dies, then retroactively the get should work from today. That would be effective. Or is it a chazara? Did he originally say mahayom, but then he's retracting and he's really saying he wants the get to take place liachar misa, in which case the get would not be effective. So we don't know exactly what it means, and that's why there's a doubt, and we say get ve'eno get. Aval hacha, but over here, when we're talking about writing over his property to his sons, hachi kamarle, this is what he's saying to him. Guf kani mehayom, you're going to acquire the property itself, you'll acquire from today. But pira la'achar misa, but the produce that you're going to get after I die, and so that kind of kinyan, we're not talking about a doubt, we have no doubt what he means. He's saying that the son gets the property today, but the produce, the son will only have the rights to after the father dies, and that is effective. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Yossi says, Eino tzarech, it's not necessary to write mehayom, and it is still going to be effective. And the Gemara says, Rabba bar Avua cholash, Rabba bar Avua was sick. Alla legabe Rav Huna of Rav Nachman, Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, they went to visit him. Amar le Rav Huna le Rav Nachman, Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, Boy minei halachik Rabbi Yossi, o ein halachik Rabbi Yossi. Ask him, is the halacha like Rabbi Yossi, that you don't need to write mehayom, or is the halacha not like Rabbi Yossi, and you do need to write mehayom? Amar le, so he said back to him, Taimi de Rabbi Yossi lo yadana, I don't even know the reason of Rabbi Yossi. Halachi boy minei, now you want me to ask him whether the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi? I don't even understand Rabbi Yossi. Amar le, so he said back to him, At boy minei I halacha ilo, you ask him if the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi or not. V'taimei ano amin halacha, and the reason, in terms of the reason for Rabbi Yossi, I'll tell you the reason. So boy minei, so he asked him, Amar le, he said to him, Hachi Amar Rav, this is what Rav says, halacha Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Basra Daf, after they left from visiting, Amarle said to him, Hainu Taimid Rabbi Yossi, the reason of Rabbi Yossi is as follows. The Amar, because Rabbi Yossi says, Zmano shel shtar mochiach olav, the date that's in the document, that proves that he really means mehayom. You don't even need to say mehayom, because it goes by the date that's in the document, and that shows that he means to say mehayom. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa like this as well. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Eino tzarech, it's not necessary to say mehayom, mipnei shezmano shel shtar mochiach olav, because the date in the document, that already proves that it's mehayom. You don't have to actually say mehayom. And the Gemara continues, Boy minei Rava me Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman the following question, Bahaknoha mahu, let's say they write into the shtar a kinyan, so then would Rabbi Yehuda say you need to write mehayom in that case, or maybe since a kinyan is written into the shtar, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that there you do not need mehayom. Amar lei said to him, Bahaknoha eno tzarech, if a kinyan is written into the shtar, it's not necessary to write in there mehayom. Rav Papi Amar Rav Papi says, Iko aknisa de tzarech, v'iko aknisa de lo tzarech, sometimes a kinyan is written in the shtar, and it's necessary to write in there mehayom, and sometimes you have a kinyan in the shtar and it's not necessary. And he explains akniya v'konina minei lo tzarich. If the way it's written into the shtar is with the words akniya v'konina minei, then it's not necessary to write mehayom. Konina minei v'akniya tzarich. But if it's written konina minei v'akniya, then it is necessary to write mehayom. We'll see the Rashbam in a moment who explains. And the Gemara continues, Maskef lo Rav Chanina misura. Rav Chanina from Surah, he asked the following question: Mi'ikom midi da'anon lo yadinan. Is there something that we don't know? We the sages don't know about this distinction between akniya v'konina minei and konina minei v'akniya. V'safri yadi, and the scribes, they know about this distinction. And the Gemara says, Sha'alanuhu l'sifrei da'abaya. They asked the scribes of Abaya v'yadi, and they did know this distinction. Well, l'sifrei d'Rav, and they also asked the Sofrim. They asked the scribes of Rava v'yadi. They also knew about this distinction. And the Gemara continues, Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua, Amar Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, he says, Bein akniya v'konina minei, bein konina minei v'akniya, whether it's written akniya v'konina minei, or whether it's written konina minei v'akniya, lo tzarech, it's not necessary to write mehayom. Everyone agrees that the kinyan is written in the shtar, and no mehayom is necessary. Uveduchran piskami, dehavi be'an pona pligi, the whole machlokas in the Mishnah is talking where it's written that these were the proceedings that happened in front of us, meaning there's no kinyan written into the shtar. If there's no kinyan written into the shtar, that's the machlokas in the Mishnah, whether you need mehayom. Amar Rav Kahana said, Amrisa l'shmaita kamid Rav Zvid min Nahardoi. I said over this teaching in front of Rav Zvid from Nahardoi, v'amar li, and he said to me, Atun hachi masnisu la. You learn it in the version above. Anon hachi masnina la. But we teach it as follows. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav says that Rav Nachman says, Bahakna eino tzarich. If there's a kinyan written in, it's not necessary to say mehayom. Bein akniya v'konina minei, bein konina minei v'akniya. It doesn't matter how it's written, whether akniya v'konina minei, whether it's konina minei v'akniya. Lo tzarich, again, it's not necessary to have mehayom. But beduchran peskami dehavi be'anpana. But if the shtar just says that these are the proceedings that happened in front of us, so pligi. So that's where there's a machlokas in the Mishnah, whether or not you need mehayom. And the Rashbam explains, Bahakna Mao, if a kinyan is written into the shtar, would there still be a machlokas in the Mishnah between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi? B'shtar shekasabo kinyan, let's say you have a shtar and written into the shtar as a kinyan. Mi polig Rabbi Yehuda, would Rabbi Yehuda still argue in that case, umatzrich lemichtav mehayom, would he still require that you write into the shtar mehayom, or would he say that since there's a kinyan written into the shtar, there's no need for mehayom? And the Rashbam explains, the reason why this is a question is as follows. Because one could say, the v'shtar matana below kinyan, that if you have a shtar, and the shtar itself is being used to make the kinyan, there's no other kinyan, pligi. So maybe that's where Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi argue. Kagon, for example, shekasav sadai nesuna loch la'achar misa. So let's say he writes into the shtar, my field is going to be given to you la'achar misa. He doesn't write mehayom. Umasar lo es hashtar, and he gives over the shtar, and it's meant that the shtar should be used as the act of the kinyan. So there's a machlokas whether that works or not, because you don't have mehayom. Like we've established, the karka nikna bekesef o b'shtar b'chazaka. Karka can be acquired with money or with a shtar or with a chazaka. And so if you're doing the kinyan through the shtar and you don't have the word mehayom, that's the machlokas in the Mishnah between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. But if you wrote a separate kinyan, there was a separate act that was done as a kinyan, so maybe that would be different, and Rabbi Yehuda would not require mehayom. And the Gemara said, Akniya v'konina minei lo tzarich. The Gemara made a distinction at first between Akniya v'konina minei and konina minei v'akniya. And the Rashbam explains, Zeu shekosun b'chol shtar shekosabo kinyan. This is what they write in any shtar where there's a kinyan written into the shtar. That's how it's written. Shnei kinyanim, they mention in the shtar two kinyanim. Echad b'tchilas hashtar. First it's mentioned at the beginning of the shtar. V'kach amar lonu havu alai edim. So he said to us that you should be for me witnesses. V'konu mimeni, and you should acquire from me. V'kisvu v'chismu, and they write and they sign. V'hainu akniya, and that's the phrase of akniya. That phrase of v'kach amar lonu v'konu mimeni, etc. That is the phrase of akniya. Shehikne lo edim b'kinyan sudar. What that's saying is that he does a kinyan with the witnesses, with a kinyan sudar. He does a kinyan using a scarf. Lizkos lo l'mekabel matana, and they do it in order that through that they make a zechiyah, they make a kinyan for the person who's receiving the gift. V'yechad b'sof hashtar, and then they also write a kinyan at the end of the document. V'konina min ploni leploni, that we made a kinyan from so and so for so and so. Kechol ma dekasuf u'mefurish le'el, like everything that was written and said above. Kedamar l'kamon beget pashut, and this is going to be said later on in Paraket Pashut. Tzarach sheyachzer me'inyono shel shtar b'shita achrona, that in the last line of the shtar they sum up, they go over what was the main topic of the shtar. That's what they write in the last line. V'hilkach, and therefore, im kaza barosh ashtar akniya, if you have that akniya phrase at the beginning of the shtar, uveseva kasav v'kanina, and then at the end you have the kanina phrase, hainu yipoy koach, that's, in that situation, they're adding strength to the kinyan. Demashma shnei kinyanim hu hikna, it sounds like, it implies that there are two kinyanim that he made. V'gam anu kaninu mimenu, we also made a kinyan from him. V'kinyan yiseiru, that's like an extra kinyan, yipoy koach, it's just strengthening the kinyan, liknos mehayom, to say that the kinyan takes place from today, and that's why you wouldn't need mehayom in that case. But let's say in the beginning of the shtar it says the phrase v'kanina, you have it reversed to v'sofu, and then at the end of the shtar akniya, it uses the akniya phrase. So mashma kinyan echad, that implies that there was just one kinyan. The prushe kamefarish is just explaining v'kanina minei, there was a kinyan from him. V'heich, how did it work? Sharei hikna lanu, because he gave to us as follows. V'yamar, and he said kach v'kach, and he knows in Leploni, I'm giving such and such to so and so. Kain nira shita zu be'enai v'ikr. The Rashbam says this is what it seems to me that the Gemara means, the difference between akniya v'kanina minei and kanina minei v'akniya. And the Rashbam says ve'ein lefarish, don't explain shekasa b'shtar shnei devarim halal b'yachad. Maybe you'll say that these two phrases are written together, and it's a question of the order, akniya v'kanina minei or kanina minei akniya. The akniya v'kanina minei, that again you have the words akniya v'kanina minei, and the question is which order. Di'imkein amai mash v'chilek bein akniya v'kanina minei l'kanina minei v'akniya. Why would they then have this distinction between these two? Lishvi chilek bein heichad d'kasav shnei l'shonos kinyan laheichad lo kasav elo echad. There really should just be a distinction between whether you have it written twice or whether you have it written one time. If you're going to say that the words are all together, the real distinction should be, do you have the word kinyan twice or once? You wouldn't say that it makes a difference in terms of the order, and so therefore the Rashbam explains the way he explains, that we're talking about one phrase that's put at the beginning of the document and the other phrase that's put at the end of the document. The Gemara then says, is it possible that non lo yadinan, that we the sages don't know about this distinction? Ein rov chachamim bekiyin b'chiluk lashon zeh. Most chachamim are not experts at this distinction. V'safri yadi, and the scribes, they know about the distinction b'tzmiya. The Gemara is asking this as a question. The amri that they say lakach neskavnu, that this was the intention of the way we wrote it, v'lo tzarich l'michta mehayom, and suddenly because that intention is known to the scribes, therefore mehayom is not needed. And the Rashbam continues with a duchron peskame, in a case of duchron peskame, where what's written in the shtar is that the proceedings were done in front of us, and the Rashbam says hainu shtaridus below kinyan. That just means it's a shtar with no kinyan. When there's no kinyan, then you have a machlokas tanoim whether you need mehayom. Zichron devarim, a mention of the proceedings, velo zichron kinyan, no mention of any kinyan. V'hainu k'Rav Nachman, that follows Rav Nachman damar haknoin otzarach, who says if there is a kinyan, then you don't need mehayom. And again, the whole machlokas is if there's no kinyan. And the Rashbam continues, atun hachi masnisula, you learn it in that version Lashon Bai as a question. Kanamar leil boy Rava Rav Nachman, like we said above. Rava asked Rav Nachman the question. V'hachi kaimulon, and the Rashbam says this is how we hold. The halacha is diafilu Rabbi Yehuda, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, lo tzarach lichto mehayom. You do not need to write mehayom b'shtar sheyesh bo kinyan if in the document a kinyan is mentioned. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said hakosev nechasav livno liachar mosef. One writes over his property to his son, and it's to take place after his death. Meaning again, the son is able to use the produce after the father dies. And the Gemara says Itmar was stated, Machar haben b'chaye ho'av. Let's say the son sells his share during the lifetime of the father, v'meza ben b'chaye ho'av, and then the son actually dies while the father is still alive. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Lamed Vav Amud Beis.